Mike Jaspers, my Chief Press Secretary at the time, recently reminded me that a week into the job, after a very long day, I fell asleep on a plane, woke up with a start, and asked him if I was still the leader of the Labour Party. I remember sitting at my desk in the home that Clark and I shared in Auckland, writing a campaign launch speech. I knew I wanted climate change to be front and centre because I believed it would define our generation of politicians. I called it our nuclear-free moment. I believed it then, and I believe it even more now. Climate change is a crisis. It is upon us. And so one of the very few things I will ask of this House on my departure is that you please take the politics out of climate change. Someone asked me recently whether there were things I wish I'd managed to finish. There were definitely projects I would have liked to have seen through. Projects like the restoration of the St. James or the beginning and completion of Tokelau's airstrip. A project I felt strongly about after visiting this beautiful but remote realm country. I know if they'd told me in advance that visiting Tokelau in the absence of a place to dock would instead mean climbing onto what looked like an IRB whilst it's hanging over the side of a moving ship and then being dropped into the ocean by a very qualified, I'm sure, but very young-looking sailor, all while straddling what looks and feels like a unicycle seat whilst wearing a pulatasi, I would absolutely still have gone. I just would have worn bike pants. But aside from such projects, there were very few things I aspired to do in politics that have a natural end point. Poverty, inequality, ending environmental degradation. If you ever claim it's job done on those issues, you set the bar too low. Politics has never been a tick list for me. It's always been about progress. Sometimes you can measure it, and sometimes you can't. A valedictory is not a place to summarise a pandemic. No one has the time for that kind of group therapy. There is no question it was an incredibly tough experience for our nation at the bottom of the world. And I will concede a tough experience personally. A few weeks ago, to mark my departure, Dame Juliet gave me a mug. It had on it a graph depicting excess lives lost across developed nations. New Zealand had fared the best. If it wasn't so unorthodox for a valedictory, I would probably hold it up for no other reason than I love a house prop and to remind everyone what it was all for. You saved people's lives. Was it hard? Absolutely. But we'll never know who you kept on this earth to know how truly worth it was. There were many moments that have left me bereft, though. I still struggle to talk about March 15. There is an image from the day after the attack that was taken of me through a window. And I don't believe I've mentioned what was happening in the moments it was taken. We'd brought together a group of politicians to travel to Christchurch, and the Defence Force carried us. On the way down, I'd seen the front page of the paper and the image of a member of the Muslim community covered in blood in the aftermath of the attack. It was a devastating picture. As we arrived at the meeting venue in Christchurch, we were greeted by a range of community members. Sitting in the front row was the same person who had only hours before been photographed. As he stood to speak, I did not know what to expect. But what came next was one of the most profound memories I have of that period. He thanked us. Here was someone who had been through the most horrific experience I could imagine. And he thanked New Zealand and expressed gratitude for his home. There is much we must all continue to do in the aftermath of March 15. I consider the work of the Christchurch Call to Action amongst them, and I feel honoured and grateful to continue work on the issue of radicalisation and violent extremism online. But the most significant task for us all, as a nation, is to live up to the expectations that those who experienced it have of us, to deserve their thanks. To the Muslim community of Aotearoa, New Zealand, you have humbled me beyond words. Assalamu alaikum. To my family, people knew we were connected and you copped a lot of flack. My dad stopped watching the news for 5 years. Mind you, he comes from a long line of media protests. My nanny used to turn the television off whenever Muldoon came on. My mother took a different approach. During COVID, she took up the practice of sending me her own personal thought for the day. They were so uplifting that on occasion I'd read them out at our small staff meetings. That was with the exception of one, which I thought was a bit grandiose even for a dedicated mother. It read, "Remember, even Jesus had people who didn't like him." To my darling girl, Neve. Gosh, I love how independent you are already. She's up there, she's just on the floor somewhere. Means you won't grow up being known as the ex-Prime Minister's daughter, but rather, I will happily be known as Neve's mum, and I wouldn't have it any other way. And to my love Clark, not many politicians have a partner when they say, "I'm thinking of leaving politics," reply, "I think you should stay." But that's who you are. You're fiercely loyal. You always had my back. Now, I cannot determine what will define my time in this place, but I do hope I've demonstrated something else entirely, that you can be anxious, sensitive, kind, and wear your heart on your sleeve. You can be a mother or not. You can be an ex-Mormon or not. You can be a nerd, a crier, a hugger. You can be all of these things. And not only can you be here, you can lead just like me. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa.
Thanks for checking out our YouTube channel to stay up to date with all the latest news from the New Zealand Herald. Click the subscribe button below or check out one of the videos here and head over to nzherald.co.nz for more details on these stories and more.